Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 167 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. My guest today works as a bridge between two great institutions and communities of people, British agriculture on the one part and the armed forces on the other. If you're part of the social media sort of crew, you probably will have heard him already. It's Jeremy Gibbs. Jeremy is the founder and director of Forces Farming, which offers ex-armed forces men and women the opportunity to move into a rural career, as well as providing support to agricultural employers who may be looking to recruit veterans into their business. He's also an independent consultant on agricultural machinery and technology and a freelance agricultural journalist, writing principally about machinery and the arable sector, and like me is a member of the Guild of Agricultural Journalists. He worked for John Deere in various roles for 9 years, including spending a good deal of time in Germany. But he decided to return to the UK a few years back to work on farms and to develop his business. And I've personally known of Jeremy's work since the early days of Forces Farming, and it really is an absolute pleasure and privilege to have him on the show today, on the podcast. Jeremy, welcome to Meet the Farmers.
Thanks, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here. We've been back and forth on this for a while, haven't we? When can we find a day?
We really have. I would say almost for years.
Yeah.
It might even been that long.
I think it was the first groundswell when we bumped into each other or when we first started chatting or tried to meet up sort of thing. So, yeah.
No, it has
pleasure
been a while.
To be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how's your week going? I know that before we started recording, you've been talking about various woes with animals.
It's it's been interesting, shall we say? I like you say, I was just explaining. We jump between helping veterans and talking to veterans about job opportunities and talking to dealers about hiring from the armed forces and so on and so forth, and then jumping back across, like this morning, PDing cattle at home, move the cattle back, turn round, load the lambs, realise that the bull has got out, gone back to where the cows are calving. And because where we are, we haven't got any real permanent fencing. We do everything sort of mob grazing and whatnot. We kind of had to chase him around for about half an hour to get him back to where he should be, and then move them from there to one field that we do have that has fences. So, and then come back home with the cattle trailer in tow, no livestock in it, but go across, fence some more paddocks for the ewes, and then I'll go back this afternoon and I'll pick them up and put them back on that. And I don't know, it's just one of the things I think you just kind of embrace it and you just kind of roll with it, don't you? And the one thing I do say that I really enjoy is the variety.
You've certainly got that in your life, that's for sure. Let's talk about your part of the world first of all. So you live with your girlfriend in the New Forest near Salisbury.
Yeah, so we're on the almost on the Dorset-Hampshire border, and literally 5 minutes up the road is the Wiltshire border. So, we're just next to the River Avon. Where I am at the moment, we're probably not even 100 metres from the river itself. And then you go across the river, and that's where we've predominantly got all of our grazing in terms of floodplain meadows and that sort of setup, which is great. A year like this where we've had drought, it's been fine because we've still had moisture in the ground to keep the grass growing. But on the flip side of that, some of it is gravel, which has completely sort of given up the ghost through the summer, basically. Yeah.
Today's largely about Forces Farming, so let's dive straight into that. Tell us a bit more about Forces Farming and what it actually is, what it is that you're trying to do.
So I always say it's the link between the armed forces and agriculture. When I came back, as you alluded to earlier, when I came back from Germany, did a couple of different jobs in the UK. And then in the background, I've always had friends that have gone off to serve and been in the armed forces and come out and found themselves a job and whatnot. And it was really through discussing with my best friend from school, what happens at the end, is agriculture even put on the table to some people? And the feedback was it's not. And the difference with what I'm doing is it's someone from a sector, so from agriculture, going into the armed forces network and sort of pulling them that way, rather than someone from the armed forces trying to feed people into an industry.
And Forces into Agriculture is your CIC, which you formed, and this is your next focus for growth. Just tell me a bit more about this.
Yeah, so if you imagine, basically I started the business off my own back with the plan that this would be a thing on the side And while I'm working in agriculture, doing a day-to-day job, I can take phone calls and post some things on social media and things like that, and just be a sort of correspondent, if you like.
Yeah.
And I very quickly realised that
it was a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger than that, and it could be a lot bigger than that. And then last year set up, the community interest company, so that I could start looking more into what you'd call the sort of wounded, injured, and sick sector. So you've obviously got veterans that are coming out who are transitioning out the forces regardless of rank.
Yep.
And then there's the armed forces, let's say charity network, who are looking for opportunities for people who may be signed off with PTSD. They might still be working through things with PTSD. So I use the community interest company as a way of funding more, not the therapeutic work, but more the work that, look, if you just want to come and spend some time, honestly, scratching cows' heads, talking about sheep, doing some field work, doing some fencing, there's a lot of discussions and a lot of chats that happen when you're working, that might not come up if someone's sitting in a room talking to someone one-to-one with an hour slot to cover everything they need, sort of thing. So the community interest company allows me to over the next few months to start applying for grants and funding to make some of the events open to the wider audience, shall we say.
So you mentioned that you've got friends who are from forces backgrounds. You're not from a forces background yourself. Obviously, you've got a great deal of experience in this sort of agricultural world. But take us back to those very early days of where the idea come from. Was there a moment when you thought, forces farming needs to be a thing?
Yeah, so back in, I think it was 2016, it might have been 17, I can't remember, I'm terrible with dates and things. But yeah, so I was on my way home. I used to work for quite a large biogas plant, and we got rained off one day, and I was coming back through my home village, and my best friend's parents are in the same village. And I just thought, I know, I've got an hour, I'll call in and have a coffee with them. So stopped in, knocked on the door, we sat down, had a chat, and they actually turned around to me and said, it's interesting that you've called in today because we're waiting to hear if their son's going to be medically discharged.
Wow. Okay.
So he, like many others, had planned his whole career, his whole life to be in the army, work up through the ranks. His parents were in the armed forces, his grandparents were in the armed forces, and they actually got the phone call from him saying, I'm being medically discharged and, I've got to look for something else. And it wasn't the shock, but it was just sitting there realizing that suddenly that person, regardless of where they are, whether it's a friend or not, or anyone that's got in touch, suddenly you're in a position where you have to find something different, a new career. And if that's come at you as a shock, then, where do you turn? And I always use the analogy. If you went onto a farm and said to a farmer, right, in 6 months, you need to be doing a different job, what would you do? You couldn't put farmers, let's say, into, every single role. Yeah, of course, they would flourish in some, but, it's very, very similar in terms of, well, this is what I plan to do for my life. It's not going to work out that way. Where do I go next?
Yeah.
And just talking to him as he was coming up to leave, I sort of said to him, is it not on the cards? And he said, it's not really promoted. It's not really offered. And then at the same time, about a few months later, I was talking to a large agricultural contractor who had a very, very hefty bill on his insurance renewal. And 90% of that was coming from his seasonal staff. Mm. And I just said, look, have you never thought about recruiting from the armed forces? And it was when he said to me, I wouldn't know how, I wouldn't know where, and I wouldn't know how to make sure they've got, let's say, the basic training.
Yeah.
Check the tires, check oil, check water, driving loaded trailers, all of this, all of that. And I just thought, well, they're quite easy things to cover in terms of the training. And when I was at John Deere, my background was training as well. And I thought, well, maybe I can start to look down this route of, working with farmers and businesses to get people in, familiarize them with the industry and the machinery, and start to bring, let's say, a different genre of operator into agriculture.
We'll go a bit more into forces farming a bit later, but let's focus in on you for a bit. Going way back, how did your interest in farming start? And also, then when did you know that you wanted to have a career in agriculture?
So that's a very good question. So going back as long as I can remember. So my grandfather farmed in Northumberland. He was a tenant farmer. My uncle obviously would have been the natural sort of successor. He went off to Australia.
Okay.
Never had an interest in farming. My mum has an interest in farming, but the same thing, didn't want to run the family business. So that sort of tenancy ended up in Northumberland. And then I came along, and I was pretty much always playing with tractors, looking at tractors, model farm, and then I think about 10 or 11, this is probably, early 90s, when you could get on a bike and cycle and no one really worried where you were. Went down to some family friends that have got a dairy farm and literally used to stand in the herringbone parlour, like just watching.
Yeah.
And then, riding in tractors and it's just, it's never been anything else, to be honest with you. And that went on to, agricultural college. I had 3 years at Sparsholt, and that just really cemented that it was what I wanted to do. And moved on from there up to Harper Adams. Did 3 years, technically 3 years, but I failed my first year. A little bit too much rugby and a little bit too much partying, shall we say. But because I'd done the course at Sparsholt, I was able to top up to a higher national diploma and then top up onto a degree sort of thing. So, and I'll be honest, this is probably another one for, for anyone that's looking at getting into agriculture, as I've sort of developed and learned more and grown and seen more, I kind of realized that I wanted to do more. So I went from just wanting to work on a farm, driving tractors when I was 16, 17, to actually looking, okay, well, maybe I want to work in a dealership, or maybe I want to work for one of the manufacturers. And after a little bit of time in Australia and New Zealand, came back to the UK, and pretty much sent a letter back then. I don't think we did. I don't think we even did many emails back then, but sent a letter to John Deere and just said, look, do you have any positions? Are you hiring?
Okay.
And back in those days, they used to have a management trainee, which you'd go from department to department to department. And I chased them and hounded them and kind of said, have you got an answer? Can I come and see you? And eventually they said, look, we're not going to hire a management trainee, but we are going to hire like a product specialist to follow some test machines around the country. So after I'd sort of realized I didn't just want to operate machines on farms, I wanted to kind of sell them, design them, build them, that kind of thing. Went off to John Deere, had about 3 or 4 months as a sort of seasonal role, and then moved into the training center. And I'll be honest with you, that's where I realized that I just really enjoy working with people, training.
Yeah.
I don't say teaching people, because I'm a great believer. If you put someone in the right environment, they will learn. Rather than, let's say, hours and hours of teaching someone, well, let's put you in a situation, we'll give you some activities, things like that, and you can learn and you can do it and you can move forward at your own sort of pace. Yeah. And then that led on to being offered a position in Germany. It's about 2008. Moved out there and things developed from there. Went from the training department. I was doing training for forage harvesters and combines, which I just absolutely love. I mean, anyone that works with machinery will know that combines and foragers have got a purpose. They've got like a soul, whereas a tractor, tractor's a self-propelled drawbar. I love it or hate it kind of thing. Is there? And then moved into sales and marketing, which was just a whole other world, and I was 25 when I moved out to Germany, and I just thought, what a fantastic opportunity to live a different life a little bit. You weekends, different friends, people from different countries. When I was over there, I traveled from Germany into Poland, Hungary, Italy, Spain. Had the opportunity to go to Turkey. That didn't work out, unfortunately. A lot of time in France, and then also over to China for about 10 days. And it was absolutely fantastic. If anyone's I shouldn't keep, using this, but if anyone's looking at what they want to do, is if you can go and work somewhere in another country for a little bit of time, I really think that just expands your mind and your horizons.
Yeah. Let's just talk a bit about Germany, because obviously it came about as an opportunity, but you ended up spending a good period of your life there. And I assume, you speak German and sort of how much parts of the culture did you engage with?
So when I first moved over there, I think it was just before the sort of one of the financial crises we had, when businesses were looking at reducing costs and so on and so forth. So basically, John Deere said, we can give you, or the department I was working for in training said, we can give you 40 hours of lessons. Wow. Now, that was fine, but we as a team, so again, in that team, there was me from the UK, there was an American, there was a French guy, there was two Spanish bosses we had an Italian, and it was such a diverse mix. So the problem was, if you couldn't get to the training for German, then they would run it anyway, and unfortunately, you'd lose that time. So. Wow. Yeah, it was a sort of, let's meet in the middle. And the challenge almost over in Germany is everyone speaks English pretty much. Okay. You walk into somewhere like PC World and you try your best to cobble together this German sentence. And they're like, well, why don't we just speak English?
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to learn German. Yeah. So I took the decision to basically spend 2 hours of every Friday night from 7 until 9 with a friend of a friend who was an English teacher in Germany. Okay. And she said, well, I can just reverse it and I'll teach you German. So we used to spend, when we got into it, an hour with conversational German, and then an hour like in the textbooks. And then it got to 9 o'clock. And of course, when you're 25, 26, 27, right, well, let's go out. And everyone knows that you get a lot more confident with foreign languages. Okay. Had a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I spent about probably almost 2 years doing private German lessons. And that really, really helps, because then it allowed me to sort of communicate a lot better and fit into the rugby team I was playing with. I will admit that some of the German that I learned at the rugby club, I was told not to repeat, as you can imagine. Yeah. But if you want to go to a country, and if you've got the opportunity, let's say if you're younger now and you're wondering, well, how can I get on and what can I do? Languages are so much, so important to integrate into a country. So if I sort of wind on from the sort of learning German part, in terms of integrating in there, it was little things. So when I left the marketing position, one of the last things we used to do was combine customer days at the factory. And the guys that were in my team in Germany kept saying, look, your German's good enough. You can go on stage. You can speak German. And I kept saying, no, it's not. I'll get mixed up or whatever. And they were like, no, go on, give it a go. So I did. And it was interesting. I walked up there with suit on and everything, with a beer in my hand. Okay. And put the beer down on the stage and said a few words in German, thank you for coming, etc., etc. And I picked up the beer and said, Prost, and cheers. Yep. And everyone just sort of applauded and, came over at the end and were like, well, fair play, you're an English person. And the problem was then they all thought I was fluent in German. So there was all these different dialects from around the country coming at me. And I was like, hang on. I don't speak the equivalent of, let's say, Scottish German.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was that. And it was little things like standing in a field with a combine demonstration on the border of Austria, being able to talk to the customer and understand. And what it gave me there was a bit more of not a likability, but it was a bit more appreciation for, well, actually, you've come to do this job in Germany. You've learned the language. You're getting better at it, to the point where one of the directors actually at the end, who was at the dinner, he actually came up to me at the end of the meal and he said, I don't know how you've done it. He said, but you've lost your English twang. And he said, you sound like a native speaker. And wow. I think that was just a sort of combination of my interesting way of English, sort of not merging the words, but kind of shortening the words, and then the rugby club. And I was married to a German lady as well when I was over there. Okay. And it was all that sort of context that came together and helped me integrate and really enjoy being there. Because if you, let's put it this way, if you're in a room or going out for a drink and there's 6 German people there and you're the only English person, for them all to speak English, it's like, well, let's just speak German. I'll keep up. And if I don't understand something, I'll ask, or I'll see what we can do. And I always say to someone, that is the two things that you need to get to grips with if you're learning a language. Is number one, the words and the grammar, but the other one is just try it, just have a go. Yeah. One of my good friends out in Germany I was working with, his German, I'll be honest, was terrible because he used to stitch the German words together like English. And his wife used to say, your grammar is appalling, but he was having a go. He had the confidence to try it and just sort of see how he gets by.
When and why did you decide to leave John Deere, move back to the UK, and in essence start a new life?
I got to the point where I was European sales and marketing manager. John Deere pretty much restructured the sales and marketing organization in terms of, rather than having country managers driving the sales and marketing, especially the marketing side, they said, no, we're going to centralize this. We're going to have a team in Mannheim that have a team of field sort of sales specialists. And that was around about 2011. So they came to me and said, look, we're going to offer you that job. And, you've been doing the training side and you haven't got the field experience and the sales experience, but from the people management and from the technology side and the engineering side, you get the machines. So basically me and the team over there, we spent 3 years rebuilding the combine marketing. It was just after they launched a new range of combines, and then we had one of the wettest, most horriblest harvests in 2012, where a lot of dealers and a lot of people had sold the new combine off of the brochure. Big, lovely cab, fantastic, this, that, and the other, really big grain tank, residue management system, new headers, high unload rate, everything, new rotors in the machine. So we had everything in place. And then the season just absolutely nailed it. I remember being up in about an hour south of Edinburgh with a guy who honestly couldn't get the performance out of his machine. So then we'd go back, we'd look at what options we can do. How can we work with the dealer to change this and do that? So basically after 3 years, I always have to keep reminding myself it's the corporate world. It is a business. Basically, that was the last time Putin invaded the Ukraine.
Wow.
So I think it would have been about 2014. So John Deere said, right, we need to bring back people from the Ukraine office back to Mannheim. So Jeremy, we want you to take a different position. I originally said, I don't really want to take another position because I love what I'm doing. I love combines. The team were really getting behind me after sort of 2.5, 3 years work. The ideas were coming together. The marketing messages were getting more streamlined. And I just thought it's not the right time for me to move. But basically they came back and said, look, this is the reason we've got, someone coming back from the Ukraine and we need you to take this other position. And I said, absolutely, that's no problem whatsoever. We all understand how businesses work. So then I moved across to what's called strategic marketing. So that was looking at 10 to 20 years ahead, looking at what concepts, what concepts, what machines, how are the market's going to develop, what do we need to have? So take Draper headers, for example. We had them up in Scotland in about 2010, 2011, 2012. We had test machines in East Anglia. And here we are like 10 years later, and it's one of the most important technologies that's been launched. So I absolutely loved it. At the same time, I was a little bit suffering with that line of, okay, well, what did I do wrong? What have I done wrong that they've moved me out of that job into a position that I'm not enjoying as much? And I'll be honest with you, I started to run myself down and realized that, actually, it is the corporate world, but you can't always do a job you love just because you want to do it, sort of thing. And things sort of started to go downhill in terms of my personal health. So I had a lot of backache, digestion problems. I was losing weight. So I lost about 3.5 stone in about 6 months.
Oh my goodness.
And I'd say luckily there was a Irish doctor in our local village whose husband was in the armed forces. So I was able to go into the doctors and just talk to her. And one day she said, like, what's going on at work? And I was like, well, let me explain. I've been moved out of this job, which I loved, put into another position. I was planning on moving back to England, and that's not going to work out, and had all this stress of, my wife at the time saying, what we're going to do, what are you going to do for work? Started looking at even importing cider into Germany, which then I realized I don't want to be an alcohol salesman in Germany. I'm a farmer at the end of the day. So I decided to leave there to come back to England with the plan to, although I've spent nearly 10 years working for them, I can start again from scratch, but let's go back to England and sort of almost kind of push reset. And it was those sort of 6 months to a year of kind of questioning what I'd done wrong that was actually causing me to lose the weight. So the doctor basically said to me, like, your brain's telling your body that you're fighting an infection and you're burning thousands of calories a day, and that's why you're losing weight. So I was actually signed off in the end with anxiety and depression, and that was sort of diagnosed by the German psychiatrist kind of thing that she'd referred me to, which was, I'll be honest with you, it's pretty scary. Like, if anyone's watching, listening to this, that is thinking things aren't quite right, when you get someone else tell you that this is why they're not right, it's pretty scary, because then you're at the point of like, shit, what do I do now?
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I mean, I've been through similar thing as well, and it's been. But what I found but it's also the relief behind it as well. That's what I found. It's like oh my goodness, you can almost relax into because you don't know what's going on. You have no idea what's going on at the time.
No, and I think we talked about it before, but if you've got a mind full of everything going on, and I think this is especially true for farming, so much going on every single day, looking into the future, planning what's going on, dealing with things that go wrong, dealing with the family at home, succession, business planning, finances, all of that. If you suddenly get to the point where someone says, well, this is what is causing you problems or causing you issues, and the thing with me was, it used to, and it still does, to be honest with you, the mental health challenges that I have, they sort of, they appear as, let's say, physical health problems. So, if I've probably lost, I don't know, in the last couple of weeks, probably 5 or 6 kilos at least, just from stressing about things, from things not working out, questioning what I'm doing, questioning where I'm going, all of that sort of side of it.
But the difference is here and right now is that you're aware of that, aren't you? You know that.
Yeah. So, exactly that. And that's the other thing, I'll be honest, that is a real good sort of identifier for me is my relation to the dog. Is if I'm shouting at the dog, then I know my temper's got shorter. I'm getting more frustrated. Something's not going right, kind of thing. And I'll be honest, this to me is so important, because it's where accidents happen. If you're getting frustrated, for example, moving cattle through a yard, and one turns round and you turn around really quickly and you slip or whatever, and then you realize, now it's got even worse because I've got a sort of physical injury kind of thing. So, that's why I sort of always, I'm really open. I'll talk to any, not to anyone, but, I'll call a spade, and I'll tell people that, what happened in the past and how that sort of led on to the marriage breaking down and that adding more stress and more unhappiness kind of thing, and more questioning of myself kind of thing, and even to this day, we're best part of 6 years on from that sort of time, but it still haunts me to this day, questioning myself and confidence and that sort of thing. But like you say, it's knowing it's there and it's being able to manage it and react, than it just being an ongoing cycle in your mind. Okay, I need to step off this treadmill for a while. And that might just be picking up the phone or going to a show and actually saying to someone, excuse me, if you can, actually things aren't all right. Genuinely. And believe it or not, well, everyone knows, but we're all in similar boats, and it just takes that one person to say, actually things aren't going well for me, and then someone else say, do you know what, same here, and suddenly you've got two people talking, and that sort of links back to having a veteran in a business or a veteran on a farm, there's not a lot of people that farmers, let's say, will listen to or respect or have an appreciation for what they do, apart from the armed forces or the emergency services. Mm-hmm. So I excuse me, I do a lot of work with the military charity sector. And a couple of weeks ago, I bumped into he's an occupational therapist for the NHS Veterans Mental Health Trust. And for example, he had no idea that agriculture has the highest suicide rate. He presumed it was veterans. And I said, but if we can get them into a similar sort of scenario, there's that opportunity that one person talks about one thing and actually you realize, well, suddenly, hang on a minute, we're both dealing with trauma. We're both dealing with stress and probably physical fatigue and things like that. So that's also been a little bit of the underlying reason for me setting up Forces Farming is I know that there is a link between veterans and farmers.
Yeah, because that was going to be one of my questions, actually. Is it so that's both from a personal basis, that personal experience that you have, but also that general awareness and those conversations that you've been having as well. Do you think that has actually helped you in terms of, I suppose, the way that you framed Forces Farming and the approach that you've taken in actually sort of creating the structure and the way that you go about it?
Yeah, definitely. If I know we're a bit all over the place, but if we go back to when I came back to England, so I had over 90 job applications to find work, and the most common theme on farm jobs, should we say, was but you've had a corporate salary and you're not going to last because you want the money and so on and so forth. And believe it or not, the only job I could find was probably for about 25% of the salary I was on in Germany, but it was driving a silage trailer for a local contractor. And I absolutely loved it.
I bet you loved it. Yeah.
It was just fantastic because, you're in the cab, you've got a sense of purpose, you know what you're doing, you've got a sense of pride, etc., etc. But applying left, right, center for all these kind of different jobs and looking at that, it's not the same transition, but I transitioned out of a 9.5-year career that I'd expected to be doing still today, 20, 30 years on. But 20 years into, I expected it to be my life, and I'd come back to England and I'd still work for John Deere and the career would carry on. And suddenly that wasn't going to be because there weren't the opportunities to come back to England and work for them here. And then the mental health challenges arose. And I just realized, well, hang on a minute, suddenly, everything needs to change. And I need to work with this change. And how do I kind of go forward, to make it work? And I thought, well, actually, it's not that dissimilar. Having a chat with a friend of mine that was medically discharged, he sort of said, you haven't served in the armed forces, he said, but you've served, in a different kind of way. And I think that's probably what helps me understand and listen to some of the challenges that some of the veterans find when they're moving out of that industry or that sector into something else, and that is what drove the structure of, insight, experience, placement and development was that, okay, if I break this down, look at a job, spend a bit of time there. If it's right for you, it's right for the employer, then look at a placement. And then long term, how do you develop, because that was it. I came back in, I think it was 2016, and I was driving silage trailers and basically had gone back to what I was doing at about, let's say, early 30s to what I was doing when I was early 20s. Mm-hmm. So almost that 10 years had kind of gone. And this is where I sort of say to people, look, you're not starting from the bottom rung of the ladder, but these foundation steps of going and spending some time on a farm, doing some volunteering, maybe spending some weekends at a dealership or helping milking or relief milking, that kind of thing. That's you engaging with frontline farmers, as I call it, and then you explain to them the network side of it, that if you're walking down, a show aisle or whatever, and you see that farmer that you worked for or did a couple of days for, you've always got that point of contact to go to. And I've kind of always said I've designed a process that fits the person rather than trying to make a person fit a process.
Yeah. You've also hit on a wider and perhaps bigger challenge for the industry there as well, for the wider industry, which is supporting older entrants into the ag industry, which is perhaps it's certainly something I don't think we've addressed on the podcast, but it's something we don't really talk about a lot. That actually, you might be in your mid-30s, you might be in your mid-40s, And I mean, we're in an age where people have multiple careers now. We're sort of more into that point. They are not necessarily not just changing jobs within one career path, but they might choose a completely different career. What could we be doing from your experience looking at veterans into ag? What about people more broadly to encourage older entrants into the industry?
That's a really good question. That's exactly it. Although I focus purely on the armed forces at the moment, the wider opportunity there of people wanting to retrain became really apparent to me during COVID.
Okay.
Was the amount of people who'd obviously been furloughed, working from home, realized that actually, doing a job that maybe either comes with a house or accommodations involved, or having a bit more of a flexibility, or working outdoors. In terms of what can we do? I mean, whether that's something along the lines of experience weekends or placements, and whether that could be, on a one-to-one kind of basis, if a farm has the potential for accommodation, or, you have someone living locally. To me, the most important thing is about giving someone a chance, because, you turn up to a farm, for example, and almost the first question is, well, what experience have you got? Absolutely nothing. I'm completely new to this. Mm-hmm. And I literally want to learn. And maybe I look at this a little bit biased, but it's sort of like, where's the education part? Where's do you want to be a farmer? This is how you do it. This is your local agricultural college. And that's another one. I think we've got some absolutely fantastic agricultural colleges.
Absolutely.
And whether there's something, I know everyone's doing it at the moment in terms of open days and so on and so forth, but genuinely, how do we tap into that group of people that have never even considered agriculture? A good example I always use is I've had a few ex-medics get in touch with me from the armed forces, who, without being too graphic, have seen a lot of things, have been at the forefront of any kind of injury or anything like that, come back here and they said, our natural progression route might be a paramedic, it might be the emergency services, but we don't want to do that because of X, Y, and Z. And I've said to a couple of people, have you ever thought about being a large animal vet? Why would I want to do that? Because you're dealing with not organs the same size, but you're dealing with animals that, farmers have a vested interest in, and you've got a relationship to agriculture. You're probably one of the most important people on the farm, and they've never even considered, actually, I can use my medical experience to be a vet.
Yeah, and this is a key part actually as well of forces farming, isn't it? Because it's not just driving tractors. You're looking at placements across the industry, and you've got that 4-stage approach, which you've already mentioned: insight, experience, placement, and development. Can you just tell me where you're at in terms of placements, and maybe give me some examples if you can?
Yeah. So if I turn it around and say, okay, from a service leaver's perspective, when they decide to leave the armed forces, they can go on something called a civilian work attachment, which means they get the approval from their boss, and they can go and spend a week, or up to almost 7 or 8 weeks, depending on how long they've served, in an industry, doing some work experience. So what I'm doing at the moment is moving into, let's say, the more official channels of the Armed Forces Transition Network, so that I can start to advertise civilian work attachments in terms of placements with various people. Unofficially, I use social media to pop something up and say, veterans looking for some weekend work. Got one guy down in Kent. I haven't spoken to him for a while, to be honest with you, but he was on a beef and sheep farm, weekends, evenings. They were at the point where they were going to offer him a sort of full-time job. I don't think it's worked out at the moment, but again, it sounds not bad, but I can't keep a hold of everyone and follow every single person. At some point, you've got to go. You're there. You kind of either need to take yourself forward or come back to me when you want to, sort of thing. But I'm starting to discuss with who was I talking to the other day? Crawford's dealer, for example, out in Kent. Okay, that's machinery based, but offering them the ability to be more transparent as a business by having someone on a placement, and then also starting to work with farmers and starting to put it out there and say, can I provide the structure to you for what you need to do? Because
Yep.
Some people have turned around to me and said, yeah, but this is too good to be true. You can't be bringing me people with no cost or no recruitment charge, et cetera, et cetera. And I always say, no, I genuinely am. The only thing you need to have is X, Y, and Z sort of insurance in place. And then, we can start to look at how we can get someone on the farm for a week. And that might just be, going around with the farm manager, listening to what they're asking, listening to what they're looking at, and then send them across to an agronomist sort of thing. So over the last couple of months, I've started to look into other industry or other areas of the industry as well. So dairy, for example. I know you had it was actually off the back of your podcast, Farmer in Train.
Super. Yeah, Sophie.
Yeah. So just dropping a message saying, look, you're clearly doing placements and so on and so forth. Can we talk and maybe see who I've got in the area that would come down? And then discussing as well with people like Kite. Becky and John from Kite, keeping in touch with them, saying, I've got a veteran in, for example, Yorkshire. Do you have anyone up there that could take them on for a little bit, maybe for a week? But I'll be honest with you, I think the biggest challenge, and this is why I'm restructuring things a little bit, is time. I don't want to take up a farmer's more of a farmer's time than I have to. So if I can get something structured in place and come to them, then it just means, okay, this is a one-page document. This is what you're asking me to do. That's what I'm likely to expect. And then, of course, there are some times when it doesn't work out. There's a veteran up north. We lost communication with him, but got back in touch eventually. And he just said, look, I just didn't have the time, and I just didn't know how to say to them that I couldn't do it anymore. And I was like, well, that's fine, but this is why I'm sitting where I'm sitting, because you can ring me and say, look, can you let them know that I can't get there anymore? Or can you let them know that I didn't enjoy that or whatever, or that didn't quite work out. So what I'm going to do now as well is through the winter, and this will be through the community interest company, start to look at what other official placements can we have across the country. So rather than me have a blanket approach for placements here, there, and everywhere, what I'm going to start to look at now is in particular partner farms, Southwest, Southeast, Midlands, etc., where there might be a bit of traveling, but still, it's easier to work with a few people than try and work with everyone. And then
that sounds really sensible. Yeah, just in terms of feedback both from farmers and the wider industry, but also from the armed forces and veterans. What are people telling you?
If we start with farmers, the one thing I get, which I should probably make a bit clearer, is it's not a recruitment company. I don't have a list of people. So I get quite a lot of farmers that are looking for seasonal operators. Yeah. That might be grain harvest, it might be silaging, etc. But the biggest challenge for me there is explaining to someone from the armed forces that, it might be a job for 2 months, but you can earn X, Y, and Z, and then we will look at what's next. It's part of the process. It's quite challenging for them to understand the concept of a seasonal role. And then, when we get to September, we'll find something. At the moment, I'm not able to fill that many seasonal roles like I would like to. Okay. And a lot of it as well revolves around sort of who have I got in my list of network people in that area who might be looking for something, and then do the two marry up in terms of, okay, that person's actually looking for let's say a dairy position, but they're in an arable area, or they're looking for an arable job and they're in the kind of Southwest, so marrying up the two is a bit of a challenge, but that's the hardest thing, is having enough people. And this is why I never promise anyone that I can find them labor, because that's a very, very dangerous thing, but it's a case of, I will have, I'll take the details, I'll email it out to all of the people I've got. I don't put everything on social media in terms of jobs and positions, but that's just purely a time thing. But I always sort of try and help find someone if I can. And then looking at it from the veterans' perspective, they understand that I'm sort of doing this off my own back kind of thing. I work with AGCO 2 days a week, and that funds the agricultural engineering career path that we've put together. But the rest of the time, answering the phone, like yesterday, for example, on the phone to a veteran for an hour, that's just me sort of absorbing those costs and deciding that there is a business here that I can grow, and then with the CIC as well, helping to fund some of it. I'll just do it. And they the funniest thing one of them said, and I said to them once, well, why does it work? Why am I engaging with veterans and service leavers? And one person said, well, because you're not doing it for any, you're not trying to gain anything. You're not then going to a business if they hire a veteran and saying, right, you now owe me 10% of the salary.
Yeah.
It's a case of like, look, if 6 months down the line, if that person's still there and they're still employed, great, make a donation into the community interest company, or we can talk about what it might have saved you. But I'm not looking to make any money out of service leavers, or even out of the industry, really. I'm terrible at taking money off of farmers. This is why I never succeeded in sales. When I like to fix things, and I look at this and think, it's a problem, isn't it? We can't get enough people and enough talent and enough long-term leaders in the industry. And if I can help by spending a bit of my time and my own money in getting the right people and talking to them, then it's not really much skin off my nose kind of thing.
Oh, honestly, I admire you so much for this. But as a listener network for this podcast, is there anything that we can all do to support you, or anything that you're looking into as the next stage of horses farming people can get involved in anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. What I'm looking for is businesses that have, let's say, a big focus on people. You have to have the appreciation that there's probably a lot of questions, there's not a lot of experience, and it might not work out. I could maybe find you someone for a week perhaps, but if that person decides they don't like getting crapped on in the parlor or whatever, that might be the thing that makes them walk out on a day, on the same day kind of thing. And then also this is one thing I try and educate the service leavers on is you can't just change jobs straight away. If it's pre-harvest or whatever, and you leave the dealership for argument's sake, or if it's just before calving or lambing and you decide it's not for you, there's a bigger impact on that. So I'm quite cautious in how I sort of promote this to the farmers. But if anyone is local to any ex-military bases, etc., and is interested in advertising, honestly, at the moment, placement opportunities, just drop me an email, location, farm type, what, if any accommodation is available, that's fantastic. And then what I'm going to do is start to filter these into the official channels of the Career Transition Partnership, as they're called, and then start to advertise these and see if we can move forward with placements. Because it's fine saying, I want to work in agriculture, it looks great, it's ideal, blah, blah, blah. But you've also generally got a family and a partner behind them. So you could have the most happy person working on a dairy up at 4 a.m, milking, etc. And then, you come to silage time and they're not home. But if the partner at home is not happy, and if the kids are not happy, living outdoors, not being around friends, not being able to nip to the shops, then I've actually created a negative environment at home. Yeah. So if there's farmers out there who are reasonably close, let's say, to any military organizations or bases, then, drop me a line. The whole thing of forces farming is it's kind of like an evolving idea. I always like to say, well, if I can adapt and evolve to the industry, then it keeps it fresh, and work with different farmers across the country to try and keep rolling, people into the farm and whatnot. Then it's got a potential for long-term success. Yeah.
Brilliant. As you know, we are going to start. We're going to start to wrap this up now. And as you know, we always finish the show with the same two questions, which I'm going to ask you now. The first is, what would your message to the public be? Any message?
I should have thought about this before we talked. I'm terrible at timekeeping. But no, I mean, in terms of the public, the biggest, most important thing for me is just think about where your food comes from. Honestly, we end up in so many debates and discussions about meat, no meat, plant, whatever, fertilizer, regenerative, so on and so forth. However, just have a think about where it's actually coming from and who's producing that. There are, yourself, there's families and there's people behind every single farm gate that are relying on, whether that's milk collections or things like that. But just have an appreciation for the people behind the farm gates who are doing the job, and things like that. So that's all I say is just think about where your food comes. Eat what you want, but just appreciate where it comes from.
Yeah, it's a great message. And finally, a message for farmers.
A message for farmers. Number one, of course, would be look at hiring a veteran. I think
of course.
That's probably the most important one, I think, because it's the underlying skills. I had it the other day. Someone said, well, they're great. They arrive on time. They do what they're told. They do it to a high standard. And I said, that's great. But at the same time, they will look at a situation slightly differently and maybe actually highlight some inefficiencies in a part of the business that you might not have thought about. And really, they're good communicators. And what you've got there is the potential to develop someone into a long-term leader, and help move the business forward, drive the business forward, ask questions and be interested. Because that's a big difference. You get a group of veterans on a farm and they're listening and they're engaged and they're asking questions. Whereas you might have another group on a farm and they're there for a farm tour, etc. And you're talking perhaps to one person in the group. So all I'd say is, regardless of experience, if you've got the opportunity, if someone applies to you without that bit of experience, then perhaps give them a go. If they come through Forces Farming, give me a call. I will be honest. I'll tell you what we've done with them, what they've experienced, what they've learned, and what kind of person they are.
I'm sure that's plenty of food for thought for our farmer listeners there. The new final question actually for the show is any farming related podcast, blog, or social media account that you'd like to give a little plug to?
Well, if you hadn't had him on last couple of weeks, it'd be the Welsh Farmer. He's an absolute dream. Yeah, exactly. No, but the person that I would highlight for that would be my friend Will Schemmel, who's at Red Hill Farms on Instagram. And it's a very different way of looking at farming, talking about farming, being transparent, and also covering stuff, things like mental health, and at the same time having a laugh and enjoying what you're doing for the right reasons, but at the same time never forgetting that it is a business. And it's like we said at the start, I think maybe before we started recording, if something's not working, you might need to make a change. We can't just keep plowing on down the same route. So anyone who's listening, check out Red Hill Farms, Will Schemmel on Instagram. He will make you smile.
Brilliant. Be sure to give him a follow. Jeremy, wow. I love that last hour and a bit actually. We've definitely gone over the hour, but huge amount there. Like I said earlier, I have massive respect for everything you're doing and your determination for making this work. And I know I'm really excited with the CIC framework of where you can take things with that. And I know that as part of the wider industry, you have so much to give, and you're giving them so much already. So thank you from behalf of all of us.
Thanks, Ben.
Finally, how do people follow you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on social. So Forces Farming, everything is at Forces Farming. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I don't do TikTok yet. I probably should, but
you should definitely go on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But yeah, at Forces Farming, or myself is at JA Gibbs 8 on Instagram. So that's where I put up some of the more personal stuff. But and I mean, I just appreciate the time to share a bit more information about what we're doing, because I'll be honest, it is an evolving thing.
Yeah.
No one's ever done this before. It's a blank page.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the best I can, and I just hope I'm not sort of over promising and under delivering, because I absolutely love agriculture. I can't think of anywhere better to work, and that's why I'm doing it, because I want to bring more people into the industry.
Cool. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on here, so thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform you're using. Please also give it a comment wherever you're listening as well. I always love hearing feedback, so that'd be really great. Share it on social media, tag us at MTF_podcast. A quick mention of what's happening this week over on our sister podcast, Rural Business Focus. That's out tomorrow. I will be joined by PR and social media guru Ria Freeman to talk about her new book, Small and Supercharged. Next week on Meet the Farmers, we'll be in Somerset, actually on the farm that I've been on for much of the summer. I'm still there now. And I'll be talking to mixed livestock farmer and Nuffield scholar Ollie White. So I hope you can join me for that. I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you all have a great week.